Introducing our next guest, Abigail Francis. Abigail has a first-class honours degree and a distinction in your masters at uni, went on to become a lecturer at university and then had a feel it in your soul moment and started your influencer journey.
I knew that I had the skills and I knew that these were skills that other people could utilise. So I didn't want to gatekeep these skills. I wanted to give them away. You need to have originality. You need to have a strong defined niche. You need to have passion. You need to add value. And you need to have a real purpose behind both what you're doing and what you're posting and who you're posting for. I'm all in. Every decision that I make, no matter how scary it is, I'm all in and I don't think of the consequences. Rome wasn't built in a day. You can't build a business overnight. You have to keep going through the dark days, through the bad days, and have faith that in the end, it will happen for you.
Introducing our next guest, Abigail Francis. Abigail has a first-class honours degree and a distinction in your masters at uni, went on to become a lecturer at university and then had a feel it in your soul moment and started your influencer journey. So you're now at 100K plus on your Instagram and you've launched your very successful online course, coaching membership. Wow. What a turnaround. And I'm so intrigued by your story because I actually am one of those people that follows you and I take all your advice and I put it into folders because it's such like practical advice. So I reached out to Abby and I was like, I need to have you on the show. So Abby, welcome.
Thank you very
to
much.
Feel it in your soul. So Abby, I like to kind of start a little bit about understanding your kind of younger formative years. What was Abby like when, I'm going to call you Abby because I know you now.
Go ahead.
I know. Abby, what was it like for you kind of like in your formative years when you were younger? What were you like? What were you like in class?
Oh, I was such a naughty child. I could not pay attention in class. I did not actually really get into studying and, actually getting good at wanting to be successful at education until I was in college.
Yeah.
I reckon final year of college. And then university was probably the first time ever that I picked up a real passion for something enough to want to study it. So absolutely naughty child. I'm sure none of my teachers would think I am. Wow. I would be where I am now.
For a naughty child, getting a first in your degree and a distinction in your masters didn't turn out too badly.
Not too badly, yeah. I got around to it in the end. Took my sweet time.
And so you were so kind of, you obviously loved it and you were brilliant at it, that you decided to actually teach it.
Yes, yeah. So I worked in marketing for a while after finishing my degree in various different kind of roles. So content creation roles, ad roles, all different things. Marketing is such a huge subject. And then got the opportunity to teach if I did my masters. And I thought, wow, that sounds amazing. I've always loved getting up and presenting and engaging with people and talking to people. So it was something I really couldn't say no to. Very scary, especially I think when I started teaching, I was only about 24. So very scary.
Yeah, 24 to be able to teach kind of, were you teaching uni students?
Yes.
So you're kind of not that much older than the students that you're teaching.
Yeah, they're around 17 to 19.
How was your kind of like, your first day in of like teaching? Because that's quite daunting to walk into a room.
Yeah, terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. I think I must have been shaken with nerves the whole time, but it got very, very easy very quickly. I think actually being close in age to the students was quite beneficial in a way because I had that trust. I had like a bit of banter with them, and actually, they did respect me because that's one thing that I was always a bit scared of going into lecturing at such a young age. And as a woman, was are the students going to respect me? Are the other staff going to respect me? And I was pleasantly surprised. Yeah, a lot of imposter syndrome going into it because of that, but it worked out right.
Imposter syndrome. Let's just unpick that a little bit. How do you, like, when you are somebody, okay, yes, you've done, you've got your accolade with university, but now you're in the real world and you're like with students and this imposter syndrome comes about. How does your mind, what do you need to do to get out of it and to go, no, I own this. I own this. How do you get yourself to that point?
Oh, God, there's a multitude of things. I would say one thing that is really good when it comes to the teaching sphere is just to remember you don't have to know absolutely everything about your subject. You just have to be 2 steps ahead from the people you're teaching. As long as you feel as though you're confidently 2 steps ahead, then you're fine. you still know more than them. So if I ever had a day where I felt, I was asked a question that I didn't quite know how to answer, I would feel confident just saying, do you know what, I don't know how to answer that right now, but I'm going to find out, I'm going to come back to you. And I would just re-educate myself, constantly re-educate, constantly refocus and things like that. But again, I think when you're passionate about a subject, it does become a lot easier to just talk, blah, 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 as much as you want.
Yeah, I think that's really sound advice, especially kind of like giving yourself permission to have a bit of vulnerability and go, hey, I'm going to go and look at that. And because you're so passionate about that subject, it's like, I need to go find out about this. So it's almost like you don't have to always go, I need to know absolutely everything.
Yes.
And
exactly.
There's a lot of kind of from a learning perspective connection that you can get with someone who is just more human about it, right? And you realize that
definitely.
when you go through things, you actually realize, hey, it's okay for me to be a bit more human about this and go, I need to find out, or I'm still going through it, rather than feeling like, I think there's a point in your life where you feel like you've got to show up, like this presentation of yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think more and more we're learning, especially I think with the growth of social media, that turning up with your authentic self, sometimes being a bit rough around the edges, is actually the thing that connects you with people.
Oh, totally. And I always say, people connect with people. They don't connect with accounts. They don't connect with a profile on the screen. They connect with the person behind it. And again, especially if you're actually trying to actively sell something online, especially as a service, people buy from people. So actually putting your true, authentic, vulnerable self out there, it feels very terrifying for a lot of people, but it really does make all the difference when it comes to building those connections, making those sales.
Absolutely. And so when you feel like those moments of fear, like, oh my God, I'm about to walk in, and that fear sets in, what do you practically do to kind of break that down?
Oh, just breathe and get through it. It's the same with everything. I've done this with all scary things since I was a kid. I used to be very, very anxious, and I used to physically shake when I got nervous in like job interviews and stuff like that. And then there came a time where I just thought, no one is really judging you that much. No one in the room is going to be judging you more than you're judging yourself.
So just, true. 100%.
Yeah, get rid of that. There's one thing that my mum told me when I was younger, and it stuck with me so much. And I think she learned it from her mum. But I remember when I was quite self-conscious as a teenager, the way that I looked or what I was wearing. And I was really worried about this walking down the street with my mum. And one day she says, Abby, don't worry about it. People aren't looking at you. They're too busy looking at themselves. And I was like, wow, absolutely.
That is very good advice.
Yes. And I think I've remembered it to this day. I always carry that with me.
That is definitely very good advice, because I think when you take it away from yourself, you're just like, actually, it's okay. No one really cares that much.
Yeah.
But before that, I don't know why, but you've got this like, and it's true, you make the mountain for yourself. Like nobody else has made that mountain for you to climb, but you create it. And you make it damn difficult as well. You're like, your standards are put up here. So tell me, like, how was it with other teachers? Did they kind of accept you in quite welcoming, being quite a young lecturer coming into kind of the workplace? How was that for you?
So it was quite remote at the university I taught at. So you didn't necessarily bump into a lot of teachers or a lot of staff all of the time. It would just be an occasional thing. So I couldn't really gauge exactly what they thought of me. But it was just very much there might be some stigma there. There might be some judgment there. But there's nothing you can do about it. You proved yourself that you got into this role. You did your degree. You did your master's. You're teaching. You worked. You've got yourself here. It doesn't matter if you're young. It doesn't matter if you're female. It doesn't matter. You got yourself here. So.
And do you think that when you decided that, in fact, let me just rewind it a little bit. What, at 24, that's a really successful career, right? You're a lecturer. You've done brilliantly in your studies, in your education. What made you think, I want to change this?
So I think I always wanted to work for myself. I came from a very entrepreneurial family. You know, my mum was always doing different things like yoga teaching or feng shui or, more sort of
Yeah.
like spiritual side of things. So my dad was a software engineer and he also ran like an online blog and stuff like that. So my parents were always at home. They were always doing their own thing. And I think I was really inspired by that freedom.
Mm.
And obviously I've worked 9 to 5s and I've worked proper jobs, so to speak, but the freedom wasn't there. And it was always something deep inside me that I really wanted to do, even if it was just to try, even if it was just, it wasn't going to work out. I
Mm.
would be devastated with myself if I didn't at least try to do the whole business thing.
And when you made that kind of, how did you choose? Because you didn't actually, it wasn't, if correct me if I'm wrong, you actually decided to start your own business first, didn't you? Was that the first move that you did coming out of teaching? What was the first kind of change that you had?
Yeah, so people always say, entrepreneurs normally only ever succeed on their third or fourth business, and this is absolutely the case for me. I had various different things. I think my first stint was with business was
Yeah.
creating like a festival glitter line when I was still in uni, and when I finished uni, I actually did some freelance marketing for various different places. All different types of industries and finance and food, bars, social media agent, like you name it, a bunch of different people I was sort of working for on a freelance basis.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started working 9 to 5. And then obviously I got the lecturer job. And then I started another business along the side just because I wasn't
Wow,
quite ready to let it go.
It was deep
Yes.
in you to kind of take this
kept coming back.
entrepreneurial
Yeah.
plunge, right?
It kept coming back and I just had to listen to myself.
I think that's super interesting because they say that life has its way of, if you don't quite get what life's trying to teach you or give to you, it will keep showing up
Yes.
until you're like,
Oh, yes. I 100% agree with that.
So there's many kind of reincarnations of
Yes.
you literally going, I want to start something online or a business, and then you kind of moved. You had quite a successful. Was it a swimwear?
Yes, it
So
was.
talk me through that.
So that was the one that I started sort of alongside lecturing, and it went really well. The first year, the profits were great. I just secured like a 12K loan to sort of invest into more stock. I invested in a ton of stock, and the prediction that I had for the following year was even better than the first year. I was so surprised I ended in profit in the first year as a new e-commerce business. But then obviously the pandemic happened, and this was after the loan. This was after I'd bought all of this
Just
stock.
at the point where you got everything in.
Yeah. Right, because it was around March, and that's when you sort of get ready to go into the summer season and start selling swimwear. And it completely crashed. Because no one was swimming, no one was going on holiday, no one was even leaving their houses, the pools weren't open. There was no, and this was a global thing, not even just in the UK, because I was an international business. So yeah, it was almost like an overnight crash of that business.
And for you, having left a secure job, and now kind of finding yourself, in this space where you've just now taken on a loan, you've brought all this stock, and now the world as we know it is literally gone into a whirlwind. Tell me the thoughts that were going through your mind.
Oh, God. I was pretty terrified, understandably. I was trying to think how I could sell all this stock, if there was a way I could sell it as like a stockpile, or if anyone would want it. It was just going through my head, how the hell am I going to pay back this loan now? I was still working at the university, but just on a part-time basis, like maybe around 8 hours a week, something like that, just a few lessons. But I really wasn't ready to give up the dream of owning a business. So that's kind of when that conception of Holler Academy, which is the business I run now, that's when that sort of conceptualized and became a
So this was a
reality.
locked down kind of...
It was a lockdown business. Yes, I was one of those.
Well, you know what? I think anyone who tells me they started their lockdown business, I'm like, time well spent. I mean, it's
definitely.
really the time that everyone could literally get into their zone.
Yes.
And not feel guilty about it, because everybody's like, you're indoors, right? You either watch Netflix or maybe create a business.
Yeah.
Right? So you
Just
were
one or
like,
the other.
I think I'll pass on that box set and I'll start kind of working on this business that I had in my mind. So tell me about Had you done much social media before?
Yeah, so I'd worked social media, both obviously freelance for various different companies, and then at, my older job, and then also for the various businesses that I had before. So I think the swimwear company was at around 15,000 in a year,
Yeah,
15,000 followers on Instagram. So it was quite good. And obviously I knew all of the theory behind it through my studies, through my interests, through the books that I read. And I saw an opportunity, and that opportunity was the influx of people wanting to become creators and influencers in the pandemic.
absolutely.
Yeah. So
That now when you look at it, it has
mm,
blown up, right?
massively. It was always a thing. Influencers have been a thing for ages, but I feel like in the pandemic, people had all this time. They had all this, time to build a presence, to show their creativity, to actually delve into their passion, whatever that may be. But a lot of people sort of didn't know how that social media sphere worked, and I did. So I put two and two together, and I thought, right, okay, this was the original conception of the business, but of course it changed in various different ways along over the past
Mm.
3 years or so. Um, but it did start off as almost like an influencer creator training kind of academy.
And I think that is really why it's so successful. As somebody who, uses some of your some of your tips and insights, is that you come at it at a very almost like educator way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like I always felt like Instagram was this dark art. Now TikTok is, but it's almost like this like dark art that nobody quite knows. There's people that have, hit all these like big numbers. Not the ones that have got a following because perhaps, they're known for being an actor or a
Mm.
musician, but actual influencers. And you're going, how does that work? And no one knows and nobody tells each other. And I think your profile and your page, it just kind of gives real breakdowns
Mm.
on the kind of analytics behind it
Mm.
and the algorithms. I mean, when everyone's talking about algorithms, it always kind of like goes over your head, you glaze over, you go, okay, it means this word means I definitely won't understand it.
Mm.
But you literally break it down into, I think it's because of your lecturer and you teach
Possibly.
it. You literally
Yeah.
teach it in real bite-sized form. And I think that's been the secret of your success. What was the kind of thinking behind what you wanted to create? Did you have like, I want to hit this, I want to, or was it that you want to kind of educate? What was it that you were trying to do?
It was definitely that I knew that I had the skills, and I knew that these were skills that other people could utilize. So I didn't want to gatekeep these skills. I wanted to give them away, um, both for free and on a paid basis. Of course, I wanted to make a
Mm.
living for myself. Um, but yeah, I just really wanted to give away what I already knew to people who were, like you said, a bit in the dark about how social media works, because it is always changing, and it kind of takes people who are obsessed with the platform
Yeah.
and all of its changes, which are frequent and many, as we know,
Yeah.
to keep them informed, updated, and really help them through that. So it definitely started as an educational kind of venture, and it's definitely still something that runs strong throughout my content, throughout the business, for sure, 100%.
And what advice would you give like, to anybody who's thinking of, kind of starting a career in, one of the social media platforms, and people are kind of maybe saying, oh, it's, maybe saturated now or it's too difficult. What would you say?
It is still very much not saturated. There are millions and millions of people on this app. You just have to find your people. A good case study I could say is I built up a new account last year, and in the span of about 6 months, I grew it to around 60,000 followers. And this was just at the end of last year. So very fresh, very new.
Mm.
So that should tell you, organic growth is still 100%
You still think
possible.
it's possible
Yes.
without spending the big money?
Oh, definitely. I didn't spend a penny on that account. Completely organic, 100%. You just need to have a few different things. You need to have originality. You need to have a strong, defined niche. You need to have passion. You need to add value. And you need to have a real purpose behind both what you're doing and what you're posting and who you're posting for. And if you have all of those things together and you take the time to understand the platform, then there is no reason at all that somebody can't grow in 2023.
Wow, that is really sound advice. And when you say you need to have a niche, explain to me what you mean by that.
So a niche is kind of a bit like an industry. So it is one topic or a small group of topics that you talk exclusively about. So it could be, for example, for me, it's Instagram marketing, Instagram growth, and that's very much what I stick to. I might occasionally branch out into other subjects that relate back to it, but they always have to make sense. This is the way that the algorithm sort of collects that information about you once it knows exactly what you're talking about. And that's why it has to be sort of one specific kind of thing or group of things. Then it knows who to show you to. Obviously, Instagram's end goal is just to keep people on the app for as long as possible and keep people happy on the app. That is how they make their money, because that's how they sell the most ad space. So by having a niche, which is your own little industry, your own little thing that you talk about, you're more likely to get that reach and get seen by new people, just simply because Instagram now knows who you are, what you do, who you do it for, ultimately then who to show you to.
And do you think that you need to, have, when they kind of have like beautifully created pictures, and do you think you need to be somebody who's able, to use, whatever packages there are to make things beautiful? Do you think it's still okay to have something that is organic or kind of grassroots up?
Oh, absolutely.
Is there still space for that?
There is definitely still space for that. In fact, I would argue that it's actually coming back in fashion and back in popularity. I think that whole curated, perfect feed that we think of when we think of typical influencers or creators isn't really the best way that I can describe it is it's a bit 2018. It's a bit pre-pandemic. We're all a bit more real now. We have opened up to accepting and receiving vulnerability on social media, and we really love seeing that kind of messy, vulnerable human side of people. So I would actually argue that now more than ever, that curated perfect life is just not what people want to see anymore.
That's so interesting. I think as well, the lockdown has probably got a lot to do with how things are now starting to kind of, it's probably one of the reasons why the growth of TikTok has really exploded, because it does feel like a bit raw. And I think that is kind of appealing to people. And so when you had that moment, just kind of taking it back, because it feels like you were able to be okay with the fact that you changed things up. And I think this is a really important point, because sometimes we kind of feel like when we make a grand decision to go and do something and it doesn't quite work out, which happens, right? Rather than dwelling in it or kind of like, right, this hasn't worked, that means this is not for me. It's almost like you were not thinking this is not for me. You were like, haven't quite found the right fit. It's like, I've got this jigsaw puzzle and I'm putting it in and I'm going to try it in every single space until I find the one. Having a 1.5-year-old, this is my now, now I'm kind of finding ways that you put squares into, but like I kind of see her like trying to put a square into the star, into the triangle. She finally finds the square, she puts it in, right? And there's something really kind of to be said about the fact that it's okay to trial things out. Like you don't have to be like, I've got this finished article, this is what I'm going to be, I'm going to try it, it's going to be a success. And if it's not, the failure kind of puts you into a kind of spiral of, that wasn't for me, maybe I'm not an entrepreneur. Tell me about what it is about your mindset that allows you to be so, because you're quite fluid, a lot of people would take a knock back and go, oh, you know what, let me just go back to that safe 9 to 5 that I had. What is it that that you think, or that you feel like allows you to be so experimental?
Well, like I said, sort of going back to something I said at the beginning, it takes people normally a few businesses before they find one that actually sticks with them. And actually, I believe the last statistics that I saw on this was 3 and 4 small businesses either close or don't make profit or don't even break even within the first year. So it's very much, if you want to get into being an entrepreneur, you have to be thick-skinned, you have to be strong, you have to be willing to accept that this might fail. And I think I've always had that in me. I also would say I have a very strong support system when it comes to my family, my mum, my dad, and they've always kind of believed in me and trusted me and taught me that taking risks is fine. And I've always been a risk taker. I've never been somebody that just sort of tiptoes around things. I'm all in. Every decision that I make, no matter how scary it is, I'm all in, and I don't think of the consequences. And I think it is partly that rational thinking of knowing the statistics. It's partly that support system of having a great family, and even an entrepreneurial family, and then just being a natural risk taker from birth.
That should do it. So I do actually also think that your kind of academic approach to things, which is what really drew me to your content, was that it was, it kind of felt like, sometimes when you listen, you see stuff, it just feels a bit fluffy. Whereas I think yours is really detailed. And that kind of whole thing of data, analyzing data and actually understanding, oh, if that's the statistic, right? So then I know that if I'm going out to be, like, let's say I'm choosing to be an entrepreneur, then that's the core of what I want to do. Finding the fit of what it is may take more than one attempt. And if you go at it from that point of view, you're not kind of setting yourself up for failure, because you're almost like, okay, tick, that was my first go. Let's move on to the second go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that is where a lot of people who want to get into owning a small business kind of fall flat, is believing that if it didn't work the first time, that's it. It didn't work. They can't do it. They're not good at business. They should go back to a 9 to 5. They should go back to stability. But actually, it's about knowing that it's okay to change, it's okay to adapt. Even with Hollow, which is obviously successful, and it's been going for like 3 years, it's still changed massively, and you can't be afraid of that change, because the world is always changing, your audience is always changing, who you are is always changing, the trends are always changing. You have to be comfortable with change if you want to settle into this kind of entrepreneurial world.
And what's kind of next for Hollow Academy?
Oh, well, I have a few big projects that I'm really wanting to work on this year. Those being a first, because I've always been quite an affordable business. This was always a big thing for me. I always said, people have always said, why don't you charge more? Why don't you charge more? But I always knew in my soul I didn't want to ever have a product or service where people would have to take out a credit card loan for. That was just a big thing for me. But I do want to launch my more mid to high ticket project this year, around sort of the £300 mark, which would be a 4 or 6 week intensive group coaching kind of course for small business owners and creators. So that's the first thing I really want to achieve this year. And then the other thing, I want to write my first book as well.
Oh,
yeah.
Tell me about your first book that you want to write.
I have so many ideas. It's obviously going to be an educational book.
Yeah, I can see that coming.
And I'm not entirely sure which way I'm going to go about it yet. But it's either going to be sort of the psychology behind social media, or it's going to be a book specifically on growing on Instagram in the current environment, or it's going to be about becoming a creator in the current environment, or it's going to be about the psychology behind influence and online influence, and actually like the theories behind influence as well, like the Robert B. Cialdini type.
Well, I definitely will be buying that book.
Oh, amazing.
Because anything that you do, you are literally the person that shines a light on how you can manage, when you're running a business and you're trying to do, especially in the beginning when I was trying to do all the Instagram by myself, you just have no idea of what you're posting, how you're posting it, why does one work, why doesn't another? And I think when you do go to a lot of agencies, it kind of gets made into this real kind of like, ambiguous kind of, like no one quite gets it, and you have to spend a lot of money to make any waves. And I think what you've done is really demystified it. And I think what you've also done is, just followed your heart and soul, and kind of thought and kind of mixed the entrepreneur side with the educator side, which is like a fantastic thing that you found this like medium of the two things that you love. So yeah, Abby, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
Great.
It's been fantastic. I'm so glad that you said yes when I reached out to you. I always ask my listeners, my guests, what advice would they give their younger self and your younger self, you're only what, 28?
Yes.
So like your younger self, when you were, especially when you were at that point that you thought, I think I'm going to leave lecturing and start my entrepreneurial kind of journey. What advice would you give yourself now, looking back?
I would say to myself, it is going to be hard and it is going to be difficult. And, there are going to be months that are absolute shite, for want of a better word. But it's worth it. Rome wasn't built in a day. You can't build a business overnight. You have to keep going through the dark days, through the bad days, and have faith that in the end, it will happen for you. So
that is such good advice. And I think it's so important for people to understand that are thinking about this journey, that you think about the fact that it's going to get hard. Yes. Because as a business owner, when I say it gets hard, it gets so shitty that you're just going, why did I start this? What possessed me? Because it really gets, and it's just you by yourself, right? And you're kind of doing it, and things aren't quite going the way that you think, and you have to understand that is part of it.
Yes.
And if you don't, that will be the reason why you give up. But
that will, yes, absolutely.
It really is. And in terms of kind of getting through some of those really dark moments where you're kind of going, I had a really good job. Why am I doing this? Or COVID has just come. What kind of how do you get your mindset out of it?
It's about always going back to your why. Why did I start this? Why do I want to do this? Why is this so important for me? Why don't I want a comfortable, safe job? And it really is. And even, if I have a bad month or a bad week, I still say to myself, I would rather have a bad week or a bad month or even a bad year than be back in a job where I don't have this freedom that I have now, where I don't have this creativity and, this independence. Even if, I had a bad week, month, year, I would still choose that over. And having that in my head and knowing my why keeps me going.
And do you have that why kind of like written up somewhere, or are you one of those people that creates vision boards? Or
yes,
are you?
Oh yes, yeah. I'm such a vision boarder. I have two. I've got one vision board for work and one vision board for life, and they're both in my study, and they just look at me every day.
They do really help. They do help on the days that you're feeling like, why am I doing this? They absolutely help. Well, Abby, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I will continue to learn from you, and thank you for kind of sharing your wisdom. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you so much as well.
Thanks.